This is an Undiscovered Legacy production and proud member of PodNation Media Network. Hello, Scoob Believers, and welcome to episode 101 of The Undiscovered Entrepreneur. And it's me, Scoob, coming at you whatever device you happen to be listening on. All right, so I don't know if you figured it out. Just got back from Podfest not too long ago, but there was a cost involved, time. And that actually put me a little bit behind. So sorry for the last couple of weeks. We are back on track, and hopefully we can keep it that way. It's been a little bit rough, but we are still going strong. We're still going forward no matter what. Also, I just wanted to make sure to let you know there is going to be a change in the format of the podcast. We are going back to 1 day a week, and I'm doing this mainly to construct some new things for you and to make a better quality podcast. A couple of things that I did learn about myself and my show during Podfest. I've talked to a lot of people, and they just said you're working too much. You have to put out a better quality product instead of more products that's kind of like mediocre. So that's what I'm going to do. So you are going to see now one episode a week. It's going to be an interview episode, and then the next episode after that is going to be business conversations with Pi, then interview, then Pi, and I'm going to throw some solos in there too. Still working on those, but really excited to put that out for you. So just wanted to let you know. I want to let you know way ahead of time here that there was some technical difficulties in the video of this podcast. So I had to kind of work with what I had. Still a great podcast, still a great episode, and still a great guest. So today, on Undiscovered Entrepreneur, Get Across the Start Line, we are talking to Munira. Now, Munira was born in Kenya, but is now based in Chicago. Munira transitioned from a corporate pharmacy career to becoming the niche navigation coach and podcast host after being laid off of her job. And that's definitely a good time to start something new. She wrote a book called The Philosophy of Niche Principles after experiencing personal tragedy, focusing on helping entrepreneurs discover their true professional calling. Munira overcame significant personal challenges and credits her children as her greatest accomplishment while dedicating her life to supporting their future. So ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to Munira. Salutations, Scoob Believers, and we are here again with another amazing entrepreneur. Today we're here with Munira. Hi, Munira.
Hi, Jesse. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Undiscovered Entrepreneur Get Across the Start Line. I super appreciate you.
Thank you so much. This is such a fun thing. I know this is going to be a fun conversation.
Usually is. I was actually on your podcast not too long ago. It was a fantastic conversation, and the only way I can give back to you is to have you on my podcast as well. So here we go.
That's what we entrepreneurs should do. Leverage other people's audiences, right?
That's right. That's what we do. That's how we get known by other people and not just one little area. So, Nerd, do me a favor and tell me, a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got across the start line in your entrepreneur adventure.
So I am Munira Zahabi. Greetings from Chicagoland, everybody. So I live in Chicago. I'm actually from Kenya, born and raised. Then I moved to Tanzania, and then I moved to California, and now I'm in Chicago after other stops along the state. But I was in corporate America, worked as a pharmacy technician, then pharma and its enterprises, different things, how to save for other pharmacies money, in inventory turns, and all of that good stuff, analyzing data, a lot of data. And I got hired as what I thought was my dream company. And 5 years later, I was, flicked out of that company because they didn't have that position anymore. So I wanted to make sure that people knew my story, and I always wanted to help people. Along the way, as I had gone into different positions within my career, I realized that I was helping other people figure out what they want to do. Somebody wanted to be a dentist. We talked. She became a pharmacist. Somebody wanted to be she was working in the pharmacy as a pharmacy technician. And what she was trying to do was this was a job where this was a stepping stool for her. but she realized that she wanted to, go to school and become a social worker. So there was different people. These are just two examples, but so many people that walked through the doors, I helped them figure out what they wanted to do. And I realized that I have a knack for that. So after I got laid off from my corporate job, I was very, very stuck. Somebody said, you need a coach. I did, started looking at different coaching programs, went through several different certification programs, and here I am living my life as an entrepreneur. And also, I'm working. I have to work as well on the side, but I'm an entrepreneur helping other people. Right now, the focus is to get other people's, to leverage other people's audiences. Sorry about
No, that's amazing. It's amazing how to me how we could start at one place and then after experiences that we have and we realize we're a zone of geniuses, we actually end up at somewhere almost completely different than where we were before. But we have to be able to take that trip. I mean, we can't just automatically know where we're going to be and be there. There's experiences that we have to experience to be able to get to where we need to go.
that. Right. That is so correct. The thing is that every aspect of my life was an experience. It was something that you had to endure to get to the next step.
Exactly. And a lot of people think this is an overnight success. You've heard that before. I'm sure everybody's heard that before. It's never really an overnight success, really. It's these experiences that we've had to get to that overnight success. Kind of like when you see a glacier or a big piece of ice or something like that's in the water. We see what's on top of the water, but we don't see what's underneath the water. And then what's underneath the water is like three times as big as what's on top of the water. And those are the experiences that we have to have before we can actually make that success.
That is so correct. I've heard a lot of people say that, it's overnight success. You have to work at it. But the key is consistency, right? Everybody has to work at it consistently. You cannot just say, I'm going to read a book and then I'm going to go do something with the book and you know everything. No, you have to read that book several times. I have a particular favorite that I usually use in my coaching sessions. And every time I read a chapter, the same, even if it's the same chapter, I get a different understanding or a different aha moment on it. And I'm thinking, I never looked at it this way before. Or maybe I was this sentence even there before? How come I missed it? So it's just at the time, but you have to keep doing it every consistently. So that's the key.
Now, there's a book that I read at least once a month called The Big Leap. And every time I read that book, I find something different in it because in that month's time that I've had before that, I've had different experiences in my business and even my regular job and things of that nature that changed my mindset to where now if I read this book again, there's something a little bit different about it that hits a little bit different.
Right. Actually, I'm looking at the big lip on on my shelf right now. It's just right across from me because
Oh,
I was
nice.
yeah, and Gay Hendricks also had a very his story is very different. I mean, he wrote many books, but you know that he was always hand to mouth and always had less money. And so what he did was, do you know the story, Jesse? Should I even talk about
No, go
this?
for it. I'm all about it.
So what happened was he started thinking differently. He said, if I say I don't have money, and instead, what if I just imagine that I have $1,000 every month in my account? And then he shared that with his wife and said, what we are going to do is with this money every month that we save, and this is imaginary money. He's always thinking he has $1,000. So with this imaginary money, we are going to go window shopping and we're going to go to restaurant shopping. And we're just going to see if we went to this particular restaurant, what would we order? And they did that. And all of a sudden, because the thinking changed and the consistency changed, his life changed for the better. And he has now become, a great author, and he speaks at a lot of things. But that's where his humble beginnings began. I didn't know if you wanted to know that.
No, that's good. Actually, we can take that into heart for ourselves too. I mean, it's not going to make anything different whether we imagine we have the money or we don't have the money. It's imaginary money anyway. But having that consistent mindset and kind of willing it to fruition is really what makes the big difference in that.
Right. And you have to think about it as already having it, right? So most people, like I've heard Tony Robbins say this, and then also Bob Proctor used to say that you always have to imagine that you have it already. Like if you want a job, you want a slim body, you want to have thousands of dollars in your account, all you have to do is imagine that you have the money. And once you have it in your imagination, you start thinking about it the positive way. So now you're making it come to you. It's the power of attraction, cause and effect, and all of the other laws that are out there.
Well, it's just like, a lot of people, I used to sell cars a long time ago. And one thing that one of my customers always told me about was how they bought a red car and then suddenly they see all the red cars on the
Yeah,
road,
the
right? Like, oh, there's a
RSV,
red car. There's a red car.
right? They call it the RSV factor because your reticular mind starts thinking about exactly what you want, and it shows up all the time.
And that's kind of what I think about when we say we want to kind of actualize these things into fruition.
Right. So being an entrepreneur is where is it that you want to go and then hold that image all the time.
All right, that's awesome. So uh, I'm looking across the top there and it says niche navigator.
Right.
And can you explain a little more about what a niche actually is? Because I know some of my newer people are just getting started and they need to know what a niche actually is.
So the niche is a foundation. What is it that you want to do? And what is it that you can do every single day without getting bored? I used to work in a pharmacy. I had a person out there who worked for almost 32 years before she retired. And she just came in, she's counted the pills, she did what she wanted to do. And I always asked her, why is it that you want to just stay in the same position? Haven't you ever thought of moving up? And she goes, no, this is what I want to do. And that was her niche. That's what she did the best. And she was very, very knowledgeable, but the part of a niche is your foundation. So I believe that every entrepreneur out there has to climb three rocks, three large steps. The first one is your niche, which is your foundation. What is it that you have that you can share with the world? What is it that you don't have that you want to learn that you can share with the world? And that's going to be your foundation. I was watching a documentary one time, and they were talking about the Sears Tower here in Chicago. It is one of the oldest and one of the tallest buildings in the world. At one point it was the only tallest building until Burj Khalifa in Dubai took over. But when they were showing how they were building that building. First, Chicago is the windy city. We have Lake Michigan and all of the winds come through. So they had to keep that factor in mind. So they knew that they had to build the tallest building, but they also had to build enough foundation had to go deeper in, like your iceberg example, that would hold this building stronger. So it of the if you divide the Sears Tower in three parts, one third of it is below. So that's your niche. It's your foundation because it holds you true to what you want to do. What are you going to be known for? The second step is your ideal client, and the third one is marketing. So, as a niche navigator, I worked with several entrepreneurs trying to figure out what is it that you really want to do. Well, I want to help women. Doing what? You know, so you have to figure out exactly. I mean, sometimes when I look at lawyers, there's just not one type of lawyer. Somebody does international law, somebody does just regular law. Are you a divorce lawyer? What kind of that particular specialty is yours? And you have to embrace it and understand it, because if you try to be too many things to too many people, you are nothing to anyone.
Well, that's just it. We help everybody, we help nobody, really, if you really think about it. So that's how that works. Thank you for going over those three rocks. Those are awesome. And I'm sure if we want to learn more about the other two rocks, the marketing and the ideal client, we could get a hold of you to be able to check that out.
That would be awesome. Yes.
All right. So I'd like to ask you this. What do you think stops entrepreneurs from getting across the start line? I mean, is there something you've come across that like you've turned, you've talked to a lot of people. You have a fantastic podcast. So I want to know what you've come across as far as what stops entrepreneurs from getting across the start line.
Fear of failure.
Hmm.
That's the first one. What if I can't do it? What if? And I'm thinking, what if you can? So that's the first one. Most people, when I start when I'm introducing a guest on my podcast, I talk about, jumping in the sea with us. And there's too many of us. It's a crowded sea. But then you also have to pull away to become known for what you are. But how am I going to make you jump into this pool and say, hey, just come in, the water is just fine? People think about this and they think, oh my God, how am I going to even start? And being an entrepreneur is not easy. Today, in today's world, even though we have AI, we have so many things that we have to be have hands on. Like we're doing a podcast, we need microphone, we need the platform, we need a good computer, sound system, lighting. That's all the things that we need. But we also need Zoom, access to Zoom. We also need a software that's going to take our recorded podcast and then cut it into pieces, or edit the pieces. So you will need so many things, and there's just not one place that you can go get one thing. You have to buy several different, or have access to several different things. So the thing is, when people look at all of this and they think, how am I going to do this? So they have this analysis paralysis right from the beginning. And entrepreneurs, then they think, oh my God, I can't do this. It's just too much work. But I promise that all of us had to start there, and everybody had to learn this. And one thing that I tell everybody is enroll in the YouTube University. It's free because you get all of the materials in that university without having to spend any money, and just spend a little bit of time. Yes, as an entrepreneur, you have to spend a lot of time in the beginning. But once you have a system going, you are going to be fine. So jump in, the water is just fine.
That's great. Yeah, self-education, super important. That's going to be paramount. And when we're getting started, because I mean, if you're like the normal person, you don't have a whole lot of money to invest in a lot of self-education. So get it where you can, where it's free. YouTube University, self-education. And even if you're only, I mean, when I first started out and I started watching YouTube, I was just watching on my lunch break at work. Instead of just sitting there talking to somebody or just doing the whole doom scroll thing or whatever while I'm eating, I would actually go in there and find something that would help me in my entrepreneur adventure. And that's how I came across Pat Flynn. And Pat Flynn was my virtual mentor for many years. And he's the one that really inspired me to start a podcast. And here I am 3 years later and almost 200 episodes and going great. But I had to start somewhere. I had to find the person that I wanted to follow, to be able to learn from. And overwhelm is real. I mean, we all at one point or another are definitely going to feel that overwhelm. I mean, but we just, as long as we can wade through it, get through the red tape and whatever it is that we have to do to get to where we want to be, it's a slog, but we can do it.
Right. So I'll tell you what happened when I started my podcast. I was in a scarcity mindset. What if this person doesn't come to my podcast? What if I book a podcast later, into maybe 2 months later? Will this person even show up? What's going to happen? Right. I was in that scarcity mindset, and I realized in the first 3 months I did almost 60 podcasts. I was doing them night, day, whenever this person was available, because I didn't think that scheduling a podcast would be, something that I could do. But I just wanted to put a mic in front of the person and have them talk to me. These podcasts, if you look at my earlier podcasts, they were an hour long. And maybe they just didn't go anywhere. There was no rhyme or reason. But as I learned quickly, a year later, I realized that you just have to make sure that you are on a timed basis. Everything has to finish within 20 minutes, and you are focused, super focused on what questions you're going to ask, and what they're going to tell you. So you have to tell the person in your interviewing. So then you learn from your mistakes. And now it's just a streamline. I do 52 podcasts every year or less, because sometimes people don't show up, or because I'm not able to do them, but I do them. And I should say I don't do 52. I should say I do about 45 podcasts every year. And I have 45 different guests that come up and they tell me their story, and they're very focused. It's a 20-minute stage time on my platform, and they use it very effectively. So we have to all streamline. But as an entrepreneur, when you are starting out, to the listeners who are listening, when you are starting out, make sure you have, I didn't have that, but now I do. Make sure you have a calendar, or a way to just use your skills, where you're putting things down and saying, this from this day to from this time to this time, this is what I'm going to do. And that's what you're going to do. And that's it. Because otherwise you are spending too many hours just being overwhelmed, and you're not doing anything of value.
That's right. Exactly. I'm a good example of that too, keeping a really super strict calendar because I have two full-time jobs on top of podcasting, editing, coaching, and editing for another podcast. So I have to keep a really strict schedule on time. On this day, I'm going to be doing this at this time, and then so on and so on and so on. So another thing you do, you've actually touched on a couple of my hurdles of stop, and that's fear and failure. Fear and failure always seem to kind of coincide with each other because we kind of get into, like you were saying, you kind of get into that what if mindset. What if it doesn't work? What if I'm not good enough? And it just streams onto all kinds of different things that could be going wrong. We have to be able to get over that fear to see what's on the other side of that, because on the other side of that fear of failure is greatness.
Right, right. And nobody just started out being great. Now, unless you were born with, they say, I read somewhere only recently that if you see somebody saying that I made $1 million, they came from a family who made $1 million. So they had that backing. Most entrepreneurs are still struggling, and they are just hand to mouth. They are trying to figure out if this is going to work for them. So first of all, if you don't believe this is going to work for you, then it's what the answer is. So go ahead and believe in yourself that no, I'm going to make this work. I have to. My own story is it's been 8 years in this realm of coaching and being an entrepreneur and being an author. I've done so many different things. But when I sit down and think about it, if I had given up even for 1 minute, I would have been a dead duck. And there are times, believe me, there are times when I really think I should just give up. And I don't want to do this anymore. And you walk away from it. But every time I walk away from it and I think, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore, my heart tugs back and I say, this is what I want to do. This is what I was born to do. Let me just do that. Now, you can't get greatness immediately, but then it's also your luck, how fast you can get your wheels of the motion running. But it does take time. I'm not saying it takes 8 years. What I'm saying, it does take time. It's not going to be success overnight, but it will take time.
Exactly. We all have to take that time and understand that if we have that moment where we want to give up, kind of feel it. You still want to feel it, but let it pass at the same time too. Because if it's in your zone of genius, it's something that you're meant to do. You'll always go back to it anyway. There's been a couple everybody has that one or two moments where they want to throw their hands up in the air and say, okay, that's it. I don't want to do it anymore. But something in the back of their head is kind of like pulling them back over here. I got to do this.
Right. Right.
And that's your zone of genius speaking back to you saying, hey, this is what you're meant to do. Keep going. Something good is about to happen. Just when you get that, like when you're a miner, you want to get that last shovel in to get to that vein of gold, right? We got to get that last shovel in. If you don't put that last shovel in to get that vein of gold, you're not going to get to that vein of gold because you stopped doing what you were doing.
right. And this is also a part of Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. So this miner who just decided, I'm not going to do this. But here's the thing: do your research, right? Because the miner who gave up and said he sold all his tools to the guy who was just a garbage man. And the garbage man then found a surveyor and he says, "Come here and look at all of these things." And he said, "You're only 3 feet away from gold." And he made money. So I can imagine the guy who sold the business, the miner himself, he must have felt what his feelings were. He must have felt like he wanted to kick the garbage man and say, "You know what, I wish this didn't happen." But you didn't do your research. So you have to do your research. That's why I'm the niche navigator, because I help people figure out doing that research. People are thinking, where do I get this research from? Well, it's within you. So let's go ask the questions. We'll figure it out. Most people are sitting on gold and they don't even realize it. I'll give you an example. When I was first interviewing this girl, she told me that she was laid off from her dentist office job. She was a manager at the dentist office. But then she wanted to go and teach the principles of Think and Grow Rich in the same office. And she wanted to go do that. And I said, "Why? They don't want you there. So why do you want to do that?" She goes, "No, this is going to be really good." Okay. She tried that. But as we were talking, she kept telling me, this was after we had done the interview, she told me that she couldn't find gainful employment because every 3 months she had to go to Italy because she was renovating her grandmother's home. And I said, "Okay." And she goes, and I said, "Why did you buy the house?" Is nobody in the family wanted it. So I bought the house. And I said, "Okay, so now you're renovating it. What are you going to do with it?" And my wheels were turning because, oh my God, she's sitting on gold and she doesn't understand this. Okay, so wait a minute. What are you telling me? That you have a grandmother's home, but you don't know what you're going to do with it? Are you going to sell it? No, I'm not. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's very sentimental. Hey, how many people in this world want to go to Italy? Do you know the language? Do you know the people? Do you know the culture? Do you know the food? Do you know the area? And she goes, "Yes, I was brought up there." And I said, "Then why are you just missing this boat? Because here's the thing. How many people want to go to Italy?" I was there for a day and a half. I wish I had more days to go and look around. But we look at everything else. Like most of the tourists will go to the Colosseum, they'll go to Venice Beach, will go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and that's it. And go see the place where all of the cathedral and everything else, the Vatican City and everything. But hey, what is the culture of the Italians? What do they eat? What do they drink? There are people who are wine lovers. You have wine vineyards there, and then you have wine tasting. How many people would like to have this amazing experience? And then it hit her, and she goes, "Oh, bloody hell." So what she did was she forgot that dentist office, and I spoke to her early in 2020, late in 2017. It was too late to go, but she planned it out so well that in 2018 she took 20 trips to Italy. She took girls, she took ladies, she took a bachelorette party, she took couples, she took a whole family. And in her house she could accommodate 12 people. She had a nice big van that she invested in. She had her own family members come and cook for the people because it was authentic. So they got home cooked meals and they were not eating out. And then they got the vineyards and they went and see everything because the house is right in the middle of everything and everything is 2 hours away. And she made a ton of money. 2019, she took 47 trips. 2020 was COVID, so 2 years later, but she had made enough money to survive. 2023, she started again and she's up and running.
So
So
she
what
turned.
is it that, so for entrepreneurs out there, what is it that you have that you can leverage? And what is your niche?
So she turned it into a retreat.
She did. And one the thing is that then she then found some masseuse. Then she found, depending on the crowd, she figured out, do you need to do yoga? Do you need massages? Do you need this? Do you need half a day to just go to explore the city the way you would? And she did. And what she did, her own family members would come and say, they had their own niches, of course. So that if they wanted to just go and see the city, then she had a young kid who would go with them and just be a guide, speak the language or whatever. And it turned out to be, I mean, there's so many possibilities, right? And she couldn't see that in the beginning. But when it clicked in our conversation, she was like, bloody hell, I want to take this to the next level. And she is.
And see, and that's really where coaches come into play. It makes us think differently. It's another brain for us basically to pick at to understand that maybe they have an idea or can help me come up with my own idea that's different that I haven't thought about. And that's really where having the advantage of having a coach is.
Right, right. Because they allowing a coach just doesn't do it for you. They make sure that they see the potential in you, and then what they do is they take that potential and take it and make sure that you utilize it, because everybody has a potential. You are born with it, you just don't know where to find it.
That's great. That's awesome. We're both coaches, y'all, just so you know. Okay, so all right. So I'm gonna kind of veer off to the left here a little bit. Now, a lot of interviews that I hear on podcasts and everywhere else always talk about what was your hardest pitfall? What was the hardest problem? What was the hardest this? What was it? I like to take a different approach at it. I like to know what pitfall was your hardest but you're most proud of. What happened in your pitfall that you're glad that you had that pitfall happen because of you happen to have that pitfall? Something very positive came about it after that. Do you have anything like that ever happen to you?
Yes. So I was ready to, pack it up, because my husband really got sick. And for even though I have 8 years of podcasting experience, there was one that I just didn't do it. I didn't do it because I just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. And but I always thought about it. And I would talk to the people I wanted on my podcast, because while I was on hospital waiting list and he was in, we had so many appointments at every single day we were in different appointments. So I would just sit there in the waiting room and just talk to different people. And my heart always wanted me to keep doing this. And I couldn't because I was just so tired. I was the one who was driving, getting groceries, getting gas in it, taking my husband, everything, talking to insurance companies, talking to social security offices. It was just a lot of talking, and I didn't want to talk anymore. At the end of the day, I was just ready to, it was like I felt deflated, like a balloon, just deflated. Then wake up in the morning and start again. And I just like, this is not working. This is just not working for me. And one lady I know, know her from the John Maxwell, and she's like a mother figure. And she said, Munira, take a break. You know, just don't talk to anybody. Just take a break. And it was like, okay, I'm just gonna wrap this up. I was even putting my mic on Craigslist to sell it, and my lights on Craigslist to sell it. I don't want this. I'm gonna sell all my books, everything. It's just this closed shop right here. And my husband said, "This is your work." And he worked with HVAC, right? So he was the technician, had all of the things. And he goes, if somebody tells me that I have to sell my tools, I'm going to die. These are your tools for your business. And he made sense, but just didn't have the bandwidth. Then what happened was, he got sick. It's going to be 5 years now. He really got sick. We took him to the hospital just on the 3rd of January, and he passed away on the 7th. And the thing was that I became paralyzed. So in our culture, women have to go through a period of mourning, and it's a 4.5 month period. and you don't show your face to anybody, you don't come online, you don't talk to anybody, nothing. So it's just like completely a way to cocoon yourself and come out, emerge differently. And it's a way to deal with grief. And it was really, really hard, partly because usually other pla- in other in a different era or different timings, women of different sorts would come and visit and make conversation and have a meal with you and everything. But when that happened to me, COVID hit,
Mm.
so nobody was coming to visit, so I was pretty much alone all of the time, and that was the hardest time. And I thought, I don't want to do this. But what happened to me was, okay, I can't talk to people, but I can write a book. And I wrote a book, and that was an emergence out of the cocoonship that I came out of. It was the one of the hardest falls that I had, and it was, I don't know what I'm going to do. And in that time, I had two different coaches who took advantage of me. So those of you out there, you want to be very, very sure that if you are going to go find a coach, go look for people who are going to not take advantage of you, who are going to take you to a different level. I paid these people upfront money, and I got nothing out of it. They took my money and they ran. They knew what I was going through. It was a lot of money. And when I told my mother figure coach, I said, they took my money, and she goes, you gave it to them. They didn't take your money, you gave it to them. But I trusted them. So there's another thing as an entrepreneur, trust is the biggest factor. You have to not make sure that people are not taking advantage of you. Now, I learned one thing, that if this as a coach and you really want to work with them, don't give them upfront money. It's okay to give them $500 more, but give them in pieces, like paying your car. It's the interest, if you will. Do that, because then they'll not take your money, and you can stop at any time.
Yeah,
So
that's some good advice there. You want to make sure you do your research on the coach that you're actually hiring, and if you could find a way to see the work that they've done already, or even even talk to a couple of their clients they've had previously. Then if you're actually even able to do that at the beginning, then you're on the right track. But if you can't get a hold of anybody, or you don't see any feedback from anything, there's probably a red flag happening right there. And trust has always been a big issue for a lot of people that I've talked to as well, too. Even for me, I have to be able to trust the person that I'm talking to, that I'm giving money to, and that kind of thing, too. I had something similar to that happen to me, not as to the extent as you, but I had trusted a gentleman to make a website for me, and I was making payments to him. When I finally made the last payment to him, I never got the website, and they disappeared. So it was just kind of the same thing. I lost a pretty considerable amount of money too, because it was all in payments. But you have to be able to do your research and trust the people that you're dealing with too. Tell me about that book.
I'll tell you about my book. My book is called The Principles. Here it
I'm not surprised you have it right there.
is. The Philosophy of Niche Principles. How do you find your niche? This is exactly a book of how exactly do you figure out your niche. And I took the niche word, and I compartmentalized it. So the N in this book, I'll talk a little bit about that first. N is networking, right? So how many of us have already given advice to different people? Restaurants, movies, cars. Figure out what it is that you want to do in your life. You always do that, right? Especially us ladies, we always want to give advice. Child rearing, shoes, clothes, right? Everything. But we always recommend stuff. Now, when you're at a networking event, I want you to start thinking of a networking event in a different way. One thing you want to do is make sure that you have a number in mind, that you're going to go to a networking event and you're going to find that particular number of people, and you're really going to connect. You're not going to connect with everybody. Yes, you say hello to a lot of people, but you're not going to connect with everybody, because you're going to connect to three people or five people who are going to impact your lives. Now, depending on the network event or what you're doing, right? You want to make sure that you know this person. 3 things that you want to know about this person, 3 things that you will remember about this person, 3 things about how they were dressed. So when it comes up, you want to know. You just want, don't want to just, it's not by a fly by through the night kind of thing. You want to really make an impact. So when you go to an networking event, what you want to do is you take those 3 people and you make sure that you are silent. You talk to those 3 people, but when you're listening to different conversations, or you go into a group of where, there's a stool and you're just listening to different people, you listen. You listen, because it is in listening that you may find your niche, right? And I say this in a very instructive way, because how many times when somebody says, I don't know how to do this, and you want to say, it's just a pinch of salt and you put some paprika in and you're right. But that's not it, right? You know the answer. So what you can do is, I may have a solution for you. Would you like to hear it? Because you don't want to come off as the expert in everything, but you want to share it with them in a networking event, because there's going to be 5 different people listening. 3 weeks ago, I was at a networking event, and that's what happened. We were all sitting there. There was all these ladies at our table. One of them was an author, and she had written a book about Islamic finances and how women should take advantage of Islamic finances. And it is a really good book, and it's now not out in print yet. She just had the first copy. She was sharing it with everybody, but everybody had something to say about the book. And then she turned to me and she goes, You've been listening, but you're not talking about the book. And I said, First of all, I'm not an expert on Islamic finances. I don't even know that there's a whole book that can be written about it. So I am going to be very quiet. But the second thing is, I know how to take this book and put it out there if you are interested in learning about that. Because all she wanted is popularity. She now wants to make sure that her book is known, and she's a professor in a university, and I learned a lot about them. But one thing that I sat with her and I talked to her about how to take this book from one book published to several books published. Can you do that? And she spent a lot of money with publishers who are not even answering her calls. So
Mhm.
again, that trust factor again. But the thing is that she was very much impressed. So we have several meetings planned afterwards, and now we have a good deal going, because we're going to talk about how we can help her get to the point of making it so that she's now well renowned in different aspects. Because women in finance always, I don't know, every time you talk about finance, it's the men that show up. But then again, if you narrow it down, it's women and Islamic women in finance. So how come this is not something that everybody knows? But she's done a lot of research. She's a professor, so she's got a lot of knowledge in this. So I started talking to her about this and said, I can take your business, I can help you make sure that you are well known and give your business a voice. And she goes, I want to hear. So as in a networking event for your niche principles, in my book, that's what I talk about, is go listen to people, because you may have a solution that can turn their business to a different factor, and they can become your lifetime client. That's my book.
Awesome. That's amazing. If it's okay with you, I'd like to can we get it on Amazon, or is there anywhere else we could get it at?
Yes, it is on Amazon.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your book in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in that book, we could just have them click on to a link there and we'll have them buy your book, okay?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, for sure. And yeah, that's definitely a death in the family, especially a loved one like that, can be quite the downfall. And it really does make you think. But it sounds to me like with that extra time that you ended up with something really amazing in your book. And if that wouldn't have happened, then thank you. If that wouldn't have happened, then you would never have had time to write that book, right?
Well, yeah, in a funny sort of way. Of course, I wouldn't have wanted my husband to pass away, but
Right.
But that is the residue that happened, having a book, because I was literally running out of options as to how many books I could read, what I could do. And of course, during that time, everybody was in need of masks, so I can sew. So I was using my powers to sew masks and deliver them to the hospital. I had a cousin who would come, and every week she would come and pick up the masks from me, because that's what she did. And but everybody was scared. It was COVID is just 4 years ago, but we were really scared about how this was going to play out. I mean, the world shut down, for God's sake, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. So, do you think your book is your greatest accomplishment? What is your greatest accomplishment at this particular point?
my kids, my kids.
You know, it's funny. That's probably the most common answer that I get from that question. But tell me about kids just real quick.
Yeah. So and I'll tell you why I say that. Because Jesse, when I was married at 15, even though I was in Kenya, I was married at 15. I married a gentleman who was 13 years older to me, and I had my primary duty in that marriage was to produce a son. And I have 3 daughters and a son. He was the last baby. And after that, I couldn't have any more kids. And so, but I had also family pressure, and I was abused in the family. It was not only just my husband, but also the family decided they would do things. And, it was a time of I didn't know what to do. I had a stepmother. I couldn't go back to my dad. I couldn't talk to him about that. So I was feeling very alone. And at one point, when I had my third daughter, I realized that I don't want to live anymore. So I tried to take some pills and rat poison and tried to kill. I don't talk about this. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I did. And it was something that was not very nice. And while I was waiting for things to take effect, my kids were crying. My 3 daughters were crying. And they were just watching me. I'm laying on the floor. I remember I was laying on the floor. The girls were around me. The baby was on me because she's just a baby. And I realized at that moment that nobody but me would take care of them the way they are. Because even when they are around their family, my husband's family, nobody cared for them. If they wanted water and I was breastfeeding my other child, nobody would even get up and give one of them water. So I said, if they do this when I'm alive, do you think they're going to take care of them when I'm dead? And it was a realization that hit me. And I vowed, I got up, I went to the bathroom, I threw up, literally, and got sick later after that. I mean, there was effects and everything, but I promised myself that everything I would do would be for my kids. And I have kept that promise. Everything that I have done is for my kids. Even coming to America was for them. And along the way, I also accumulated knowledge. I became what I did. It wasn't just for me, it was for them. And now they're at a point where they give me good advice. They teach me stuff. They want me to be in their lives. I am very much ingrained in their lives as well, with the grandkids as well. And the fact is that, if anything happened to any of them, it would devastate me. And so, yes, my kids are my most proudest accomplishments. After that, I've written several books. So those are my accomplishments. But those are just phases of your entrepreneurship that you have to go through. No, you don't have to. You just feel like you have to share the knowledge with the world. That's why I wrote the books. But my kids, no doubt.
Fantastic. I'm proud of my children too, but I really think you made the right decision. I really, really do. Because who knows where they would be today if you weren't there.
Right.
So that's fantastic. Okay, so we know that all my listeners, or most of my listeners anyway, are new entrepreneurs, are just getting started in their entrepreneurial adventure. So if you came across a brand new entrepreneur and say, hey, I'm trying to start a business, what advice would you give them? What steps would you have them take?
Write everything down. Have a book with you at any given time, because ideas are like you being on a very fast highway. There's all these signs that are going to show up. And if you don't have a notebook with you, then you're going to miss those signs. I can tell you, I had this beautiful idea and I lost it in a second because I didn't write it down. So you want to write down things because what you think about at that particular time and you write it down, then you don't have to particularly write it down. Sometimes nowadays we have phones that have voice notes. You can just leave a voice note to yourself and say, this is what I'm thinking about. And make sure that it's recorded somewhere. But because the problem is that your ideas you lose them and you will never get that particular idea and you're thinking at that particular time this is such a wonderful idea. So entrepreneurs out there, listen to what I'm saying. Write your ideas down because what you may not, it may be a good idea at the time and you don't know how to implement it, but maybe 2 years later you will be taking that idea and it's germinating and now you're going to plant it in your garden so that it becomes an oak.
I can't count how many times I've been walking around at work or doing something and have this fantastic idea. It says, oh, there's no way I'm going to forget this idea. It's so wonderful. Eh. It was gone within like a couple minutes. And it's like, what did I just think? What did I just say? Oh no. And I lost the whole thing.
Right.
So I have now on my phone, my notes are just gargantuan. I got so many notes in my phone right now because I've learned that to give myself, a voice memo, write something down to remind me about what I was thinking about at that particular time. And having that information has really been miraculous for me to be able to do the things that I do, to remember the notes that I wrote down.
And sometimes you write down stuff and you're flipping through and you're thinking, oh, I said that? Really? That was a good idea. How come I didn't implement it right now? Let's do it. So that's another thing. It's a point of reference for you.
All right. So let's make sure we write stuff down, Scoop Believers. We got to be able to keep those ideas somewhere in our phones or somewhere external, not just in our heads. Because if you're anything like me, you forget things really, really quickly.
You don't want to do that.
Right.
Definitely not.
All right. So, Manira, I like to do this with all my guests. In 6 months, where to see you and your company? What's your 6-month goal for yourself?
I want to be, ooh, right now I want to be, I want to take my podcast to a different level where I want to have guests that are hard to get on my podcast. So that's number one. Number two is I also want to be capturing stages where I am speaking on stages and, making an impact on other people's lives and their businesses.
Fantastic. So, what hard guest would you like to get on your podcast? Do you have somebody do you have like a goal, somebody that you'd like to get?
Harvey has been on my list for a long time.
Who? I'm sorry?
Steve Harvey.
Oh, Steve Harvey. Wow, that's awesome. I would love that. I love to see that.
Yeah, I've been on his tail trying to figure. They don't ever answer, but I send him a message every single month and say, I would love to have you on Manira's Music. It's just 20 minutes of your time.
That's fantastic. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have another interview with you just like this in 6 months and see if we've had Steve Harvey on your podcast. And I want to see if you've hit any stages at all.
Yes, let's talk about that.
All right. So we'll do that in 6 months. Is that okay?
That sounds wonderful.
Fantastic. Okay. All right, Manira, this is your time to shine. This is the time I want you to talk about yourself, how we get a hold of you, and all that good stuff. Okay, ready, set, go.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are an entrepreneur and you like what you are hearing and you also want to be a guest on my show, you can always come to the Niche Navigator and connect with me there. There is a contact me form and I will make sure that I connect with you. TheNicheNavigator.com. I am on every different platform, but I have realized you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, but it's just too much work, right? The Niche Navigator is the amazing way to find me. Get a contact with me and just use the contact me form to make sure that you send me a message. I will reply.
All right, Manira, thank you so much for being on the Undiscovered Entrepreneur Get Across the Start. And this has been a fantastic conversation. It was all that I was hoping for and more.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day, Jesse.
All right, you too. Thank you so much. All right, Scuba Believers, make sure you stay tuned for the wrap up. All right, everybody, thank you. Bye bye. All right, Scuba Believers, that was Manura. Fantastic interview. Love talking to her, and I love talking to people of all different types of backgrounds, and it's just, she was just amazing. She went through so much to be able to get to where she's at now. But as usual, I do have a couple of takeaways here for you. Success is not an overnight journey. I think I've said that so many different times, but a consistent process of learning and growth, the self-education, the on-time learning. Embrace the experiences as a stepping stone. Understanding that what appears above the surface is only a small part of your total effort and potential. Your greatest asset is often something you already possess. You just don't know yet. By listening carefully to others and being open to new perspectives, you can uncover hidden opportunities and transform seemingly ordinary circumstances into extraordinary business ventures. So always keep your mind open, always keep an ear open. You never know when that one thing that you hear will spark something new in you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for listening to another episode of The Undiscovered Entrepreneur, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.